We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate. Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Now, Twitter has gone wild with speculation that Melania Trump is using a body double. Panel, I'll let you decide. On the show this week, Carole thinks doctors have no right to ask anyone about their sexual orientation. Afua says we're all guilty of normalising misogyny. June thinks it's time for some difficult conversations. And Greg claims he's had a good idea. It's an annual event. But first, it's yours truly. What a great week to be a crook. First, the nation's biggest police force, the Met in London, announces to throttle back on investigating what it calls low-level crime. Unless there's some good forensic evidence, victims of burglary will be told there'll be no investigation. Any CCTV footage of a crime has to yield positive results within 20 minutes of viewing, or it's discarded. This, we're told, is due to scarce resources. Yet our supposedly cash-strapped police had enough in the kitty to allow 18, yes, 18 coppers to ride the Dodgems at Hull Fair this week. They've also squandered millions on bogus investigations into a supposed Westminster paedophile ring and are still chasing up spurious claims involving a former Prime Minister, Ted Heath, who's been dead for over a decade. Here's a thought. How about more judicious spending decisions from our cops? We do pay the bill for the old bill, after all.
Not surprisingly, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we have to start by saying that, you know, all of us owe a huge amount of gratitude and for the police, and also they leave home every day not knowing if they're ever going to return. That said, you know, when burglaries and car thefts and stuff like this are described as low-level crime, it makes my blood boil, because it's the kind of crime that affects every single person in this country. Thankfully, few of us are affected by murders, and even fewer by rapes and really serious crimes. But this is not low-level. This is the sort of crime. You know, I've interviewed people who've said burglary is akin to being raped. It's the violation of your home. And people remain terrified forever. So the idea that they're not going to do this, and the fact, it always amazes me that they've got no cash to put officers on muggings and burglaries, but they have plenty of cash to investigate long dead, maybe, paedophiles, don't know for sure. The huge task force, you remember Operation Midland, £2.4 million, 14 months. They wrecked the lives and reputations of the people living. Harvey Procter was financially destitute. Lord Bramwell, a war hero, name was smeared. And they're still looking into Ted Heath. And so they have money for that. They have money for hate crime task forces. And, you know, whatever you think about hate crime, it's a perception. It's a matter of opinion, as opposed to a burglary. Well, it is.
It's always a perception. If someone shouts at someone because of their faith or because of their skin colour, that's a real crime, isn't it, to be candid?
In terms of a real crime, what I consider a real crime is a burglary, is a mugging.
OK, I think June wants to engage, I sense.
Yeah. Well, hate crime, Carole, I'm only going to make a small point of that, and then I'm going to go back to your point.
OK, sure.
Hate crimes are up 29%, highest they've been in 6 years. 79% of those are racially and religiously motivated, so it is serious.
But of the 80,000 reported last year, June, action was only taken against 16% of them, so that was how many crimes there actually were.
But it's about people feeling...
That's not how many crimes, that's how many were able to be prosecuted.
Yes,
there's a difference.
That's not the same as saying a crime didn't happen.
So why was that crime prosecuted?
It's one of those offences, like lots of sexual offences, where it's very difficult to prove. That doesn't mean the crime isn't happening, and it doesn't mean it's not serious.
But can we go back to
the wisdom of the way the police handle their budget? It's not a conversation perhaps for another time. June, you were shaking your head a little bit.
Yeah, can we go back to your original point? I think I totally see where you're coming from, Nick, but you have to understand that their resources are tight. They've had serious cuts, and I would rather that the police focus on more serious crimes, actually, because in the end, that's what's going to keep us safe. So I totally understand where the police are coming from on this one.
Can I
Greg,
just put the case that the Metropolitan Police Deputy Assistant Commissioner said. He said, with the pressure on our resources, it is not practical for our officers to spend a considerable amount of time looking into something where, for example, the value of damage or the item stolen is under £50, or the victim is not willing to support a prosecution. We need our officers to be focused on serious crime and cases where there is a realistic chance that they can solve it. I mean, let me just tell you an anecdote from me. I'm walking down a couple of years ago, walking down the street on the mobile phone. Suddenly, a guy comes past on a bike, pinches the mobile phone, and off he goes. Right? The police then go, I reported it. You have to report it because you can't claim it from the insurance unless you've got a number. Yeah. I reported it. They then spent, I would say, several days working on this, doing things. Now, the chances of them catching this guy must have been nil. Right. I thought. And my view is what they have, it's perfectly valid for them to say, what are our chances of actually...
But they probably spent days because you're Greg Dyke.
No.
I don't think a normal punter would spend days.
It's not true. They did. I went over, I spent some time in the police station. They go and found some CCTV stuff for them. I mean, the truth is, I think you have got to make judgments on what are our chances of getting this guy.
Well, I've got just a right to reply on Ted Heath, because you mentioned Ted Heath, and the Chief Constable of the Wiltshire Police has said this has been a unique investigation with unprecedented challenges, but one we as the police service had an obligation to progress in a proportionate and fully accountable manner. And I just want to make the point, I feel like there's... First of all, Carole, I agree actually with a lot of what you said. You kind of almost had me until you said that hate crime's not serious.
Well, OK, let me take that back. It is serious, it is serious, but I think in many cases it's a matter of perception whether it's actually a crime.
Well, I welcome the first part of what you just said. I think that it's completely true that some of those quote-unquote low-level crimes do cause huge hurt and suffering to people, and it's very uncomfortable to hear them described as low-level because of, you know, the impact they can have.
Exactly.
However, I feel like when you're looking at Ted Heath and other cases you feel have been a waste of money, you're looking at it with the benefit of hindsight. You can't, at the outset of an investigation, decide whether to pursue something because you know it's...
I want to take you one over this. That investigation, Afua, the guy was a fantasist. He was a liar and a fantasist, and they did not check him out before they started a £2.4 million investigation.
It's easy to say that, but I've done a lot of work on historic... I've done a lot of work on historic sex abuse cases, and the victims are almost inevitably people who have lots of problems.
They didn't check this guy, Nick, out. They didn't check him out.
Whatever may be with that case,
before we go to the Hull Fair, and what a shame Michelle isn't with us, can I tell you about this year alone? We have a police sergeant in Sussex who took it upon himself to advise Tesco and Sainsbury's that they weren't putting the female sanitary products in the right. He had enough time on his hands to do that. We go to Wales, where the police investigated four blokes who dressed out of a Cool Runnings, and they had to interview with the police. Because, no, hang on, let me finish for 1 second. And we go to Humberside. Not even. We're going to the fair. We're going to the fair in a moment. The police actually appealed for witnesses after a white man said he was racially discriminated because he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Now, all the time, police had time to investigate those. And they also, let's go to the Hull Fair. I know Michelle. I'm surprised she might be in the background if we look carefully, and we can see 18. Here we go. 18
and
police officers. And look at, and what I love is they're wearing their high-vis vests. What the bloody hell is that? And what are you wearing?
Nick.
And you're telling me I have to give a right...
Nick.
But before you come in, also, homicide, can we also make the point of homicide? Last year there was complaints made against it because it took them 47 minutes to respond to...
They're right in the bloody dodgems, love. I've got to read this by law. Deputy Chief Constable Andy McDyer. You'll like this, actually. On the final day of the 2017 Hull Fair, our officers who were policing the event took a 5-minute break to have some fun and engage with the fairground organisers. That's what you do, is it? By taking to the dodgems. Our officers, PCSOs and volunteer special constables worked long, hard hours during the event, some working 9 consecutive 10-hour shifts, try my life, and they were able to enjoy a ride before the fair leaves Hull for another year.
And total amount of arrests over 2 days, 4 people. Low-level crime.
They would try your life.
That
wouldn't be a bad swap.
The choice, exactly.
You know,
and can I just say one thing? I'm sorry, Nick. I know you don't believe a word you've just said there.
What?
They should be allowed to have some... No, not the statement. I'm talking about the men on the policemen on the dodgems. They should be allowed to have fun. PTSD levels are rising.
Oh, please.
Do you know what police officers doctors go through?
Horrific. They are incredibly
brave.
Not
why don't we want them
not riding the Dodgers.
No, but precisely, we want them to be able to enjoy themselves. Yeah. I want to know my copper is having a bit of time relaxing.
I'm not paying police officers to enjoy themselves.
But also,
I'm paying because they're incredibly brave men and women who put their lives on the line, not go for a day at the fun fair. Even you're laughing!
No, that video is pretty unfortunate. I have to
pretty unfortunate? Well, what's really unfortunate?
In another context, right, whenever we talk about terrorism, one of the things we talk about is that there is no substitute for having community police officers who are visible members of the community. We know where they live.
Don't even try. You can't keep a straight face. Keep a straight face if you are.
That's pretty hard to defend, that video, I have to say. Okay. But the principle of them being around...
I love it.
I win.
Big hole, stop. OK. This week, NHS England riled the nation's GPs, telling them they must now ask patients what goes on behind their bedroom doors. Yep, it doesn't matter if you're an 80-year-old grandma or a 16-year-old teenager. The state reckons it's entitled to know whether you sleep with men, women or both. Insulting, yes. Intrusive, of course, because a person's sexuality is their own private business. It's not their GP's, and it sure as hell isn't the state's. NHS England insists it's to comply with the Equalities Act, which says we're legally bound to ensure people who don't identify as heterosexuals aren't discriminated against. Well, if GPs don't know your sexuality, how can they discriminate against you? It'll come as no surprise this directive follows a survey by the LGBT Foundation, which has been lobbying for 7 years to have this question asked. The survey, which offered people shopping vouchers to take part, talked to just 144 LGBT people and concluded that 90% of them, that's just 117 people, would be happy to disclose details of their sexuality. Well, bully for them. But what about the millions who wouldn't and who'd be horrified if their personal info was leaked by hackers or gossiped about by GPs, receptionists and clerical staff? I'm sorry, this Orwellian intrusion is nothing to do with the nation's health and everything to do with gutless politicians allowing social policy to be dictated by minority lobby groups and an effort to look right on. Here we go.
No, not at all. I mean, the end line I disagree with, you know, when we're getting to minority lobby groups. I mean, thank goodness we have them, otherwise we'd still have Section 28. But I do agree with most of what you said there. It's an absolute invasion of privacy. It's nobody's business. But I do think maybe what we need is much more sort of neutral terms. You know, when you go to hospital, you go to the doctor, there's the assumption that you are heterosexual. You know, they ask straight away, do you have a husband if you're a woman, and vice versa if you're a man? But the point, and maybe it should be much more... They do. Maybe it should be much more neutral terms.
If you had a problem...
But I don't think people should be forced to volunteer that information.
If you had a problem that related to your sexuality, of course you're going to tell your doctor about that. I mean, you would.
No, but this is about prevention as well, and it's about the understanding that there's not a level playing field. So first of all, privacy is really important.
Doctors don't have a level playing field.
By the way, do you know what the choices are on this?
Yeah, I do.
Because you get a number of choices as to how you think you describe yourself, one of which is not stated because the person declined to provide a response. So the idea that we're forcing all these grandmas... By the way, I know some gay grandmas, don't you?
Let's go on with that. Not stated. That is put on your record. That's like a black mark. That actually says... What that says is non-compliant. That stays on your record forever if you refuse to say.
Let me just finish the point about why I think, and I understand the concerns, and none of us like the idea of the state gathering intrusive data about us, and I'm the first person to say that, but it's a fact, and it's a serious fact, that people who are lesbian or gay or bisexual are at greater risk of certain public health conditions, and they have a higher risk of alcoholism, they have higher instances of self-harm, suicide. Right, so there is a kind of a patient-centred argument and a cost argument. That
and you think doctors wouldn't see that?
Well, you know, you might not have identified something that you need addressed, but the fact that you are gay makes it easier for that to be addressed. And secondly, the reason for this is a cost reason, that it's costing the NHS more to deal with conditions they feel could have been prevented if they had more information about the patient. So
doctors don't want
I think it's important to say that as the context.
Doctors have said this will destroy many long-standing relationships they have with patients.
Some doctors.
That's not true.
Well, many doctors. Well, that is true. It is true. For doctors have come out this week and said exactly that. It will destroy long-standing relationships with patients.
Don't you think, Afua, though, our right to privacy overrides that? what you
I think
just
they're
said
competing,
there.
and I'm not saying that this wins, but I think that there are competing.
Surely, if you were saying this is compulsory, I agree with you. If you're saying, look, this is voluntary, you can put it on if you don't want. The problem is, once you, and well, I would agree with you, is what you said at the end. Once you pass anti-discriminatory legislation, you can only demonstrate if it's working or not.
Yes.
If you actually start collecting information. And I remember exactly these arguments in the job I was doing 30 years ago about whether or not you should ask people what their colour was.
Yeah.
And in the end, everyone's come to the conclusion you have to.
There are still some people who don't like to declare, and again, you always have an option.
And it's quite interesting that it is the gay organisations, the organisations who
are pushing for this.
Who are pushing for it. Now, I'm not saying... I think it all depends how it's done.
I just want to correct Carole quickly, because you said that GPs, just really quickly, you said that GPs are against it. The Royal College of GPs has said a patient's sexuality can have an impact on their healthcare, and it's helpful for GP to know.
I don't have my piece of paper with
me. It's not fair that GPs have supported it.
There's been stories in the paper all week saying GPs being quoted as objecting.
There are some GPs that
some
don't agree and some who do.
Well, credit to you, I didn't realise that it was based on interviews with 144 people. Yeah. I find that, and what I also find quite extraordinary about this very powerful lobby is that 2 weeks ago they were advocating on our census we shouldn't have to define our gender, we shouldn't have to put that. Yeah. And now yet they want, the same lobby appears to want our sexual orientation. The minute I fall off a ladder and break my wrist and it has to be set. I cannot see why that is. And I do think, and I do buy your point, that there will be something, and let's face it, the British, by and large, we are very accepting of this. So if we get a form, we're probably, I hear you, Greg, but most people are decent. Oh, they want to know that I'm gay or I'm straight or whatever, whatever. I think in some instances it's going to lead to deterioration of the relationship between doctor and patient.
Well, it's not true, because of the last census, I think 5% put the religion down as Jedi.
Yeah, but that's quite small, isn't it?
They did. They put their religion down as Jedi.
Yeah, there is a Jedi.
Also, there is a worry about security. The Information Commissioner said very recently that 1/3 of patients' information in the NHS is not secure. So just say you're a gay man or woman and you're married with kids and you haven't actually declared it yet. If the local GP's receptionist, anyone with access to a computer in a GP surgery can look at that information and maybe gossip about it. And the idea that you would think that that's an OK thing to do.
I don't know about you, Carole, but my GP has loads of personal information about me already. So if we've got concerns about what they're doing with our data, then I don't think this should affect that.
I don't want to turn on you, but why? What are we going to do once we get it? So actually I discover that I'm gay or whatever. What does it matter? What do we do with it?
What it would tell researchers, I'm not saying I'm in favour, what it tells researchers, as you can see, is there any sort of, is this the norm and what's happening, and therefore is there any sort of differentiation in terms of the treatment, in terms of what happens to people who are recognised as gay and people who are not?
It's basic. But you can't monitor something if you don't have the data.
No, I think I agree with you that what you're playing off all the time is what we're going to learn from this worth the intrusion?
That's
I agree with you.
We've got a grab here from someone who's where you are, Afua.
We think it's no more personal than any other question that you might be asked about your identity. Actually, what this means is that it means that you're counted, it means that you're included, it means that your needs as a lesbian, gay and bisexual person will matter and are valued by the NHS. And that's really, really important for lesbian, gay and bisexual people's mental health and sense of well-being.
Yes, you see, I'm offended by that. I'm totally offended by that.
That implies that they don't.
That their needs are not being met. What about the needs of everyone who isn't gay? What about them?
I'm offended by the idea.
He's not here to defend himself, so we must be careful. But the implication is that unless you state that you're gay, lesbian or bi, the NHS is not necessarily there to help you. That's and I would suggest that's a little unfair.
Gay people are suffering from some health problems at a disproportionate
Well, they can tell the doctor.
No, they're not being met. Those needs aren't
so they can tell the doctor about it. That's what you go to see the doctor for.
You can't point to gay people. I'm sorry. Oh, you've got a problem with what? And you're gay? Oh, sorry. Next.
Do you really think a doctor would do that? Seriously?
No, but that's not what Afua was saying, and that's not what he's saying.
He's saying the needs must be met.
No, what Afua is saying is, particularly in the area of mental health, there are definitely increased rates of mental illness within the LGBT community because of the way they're discriminated against in society. But I think what he's missing a point in that there are also a lot of people within the LGBTQ.
It's hard, I know.
No, it's not. I say this every day.
It's a hell of a battle.
LGBTQ. I've been saying it for the past year. Within the community who are not out. And also, this then forces people to come out. So I think there's also a slight lack of sensitivity.
It's not TQ, it's LGB in this context. It's not about transgender.
OK.
And I'm just going to quote the NHS, because we haven't heard their official position. They say, collecting and analysing data on sexual orientation allows public sector bodies to better understand, respond to and improve LGB patient services, access, outcomes and experience. To me, I get the privacy concerns, but that's basic. You can't solve something unless you know the scale of the problem.
And how do you know people are telling the truth? You know, if I was gay and hadn't told people and I wasn't out, I'd lie.
OK, fine.
So you have data that doesn't mean anything.
You want to help you. This is the moment.
Not today.
This is 2017.
Not today.
Carole, give me a number.
OK, all right. OK, time for my topic. A sex-obsessed movie titan who exploited his power to sexually harass female actors. Not Harvey Weinstein, but Alfred Hitchcock. His leading lady, Tippi Hedren, is now one of the latest Hollywood women to speak out about the culture of silence and abuse in the film industry. It stretches back decades. Since then, the content of film and TV dramas has only become more and more sexually violent. Graphic rape, abuse, and violence against women has become so normalised we barely notice it anymore. The toxic content we watch has become as normal to us as routine sexual harassment has become to those making it. That is no coincidence. The Harvey Weinsteins of this world control it, and as viewers, we lap it up. We claim it's progressive and liberating to women, but in reality, it's mostly just entertainment. We watch women being violated in much the same way as we watch sport. And until we acknowledge that we are complicit in normalising this misogyny, it will never change.
We watch women being violated in much the same way as we watch sport. I can assure you, I don't. I don't recognise any of those shows. But
you don't watch films where there are rape scenes, where there's lots of graphic sex.
If they would appear to be pertinent to the plot. I remember that a very, very powerful Jodie Foster movie where she's, I think, on a billiard table. It's horrific. Anyway, so obviously that is the whole key of the plot. But just a couple of things. Not that this makes it right. 'Twas ever thus. The casting couch. I'm not saying that justifies it, but as you've just pointed... No, of course not. As you go back. And the other thing, you seem to be painting the idea that there's just no powerful women anywhere in the decision-making process. They're all sitting there timidly in meetings, and these giant, let's not name any names, but these vast titans are saying, I just want more rapes, and I just want more brutal, and here we are, violation of women, and all the others,
I was really hoping that we could take it forward beyond that, because that's a real oversimplification.
There are only 5% of Hollywood directors are women, so therefore that's going to have an impact on the kind of content we see and how women are portrayed on screen.
A lot of powerful women actors, though, June, women who've had power and clout for the last 20 years.
But they're still actresses for hire.
They can say,
the power lies with the directors and the producers. You know, there aren't many women in that position.
Complicit. Everyone in this situation is complicit. Interesting. I interviewed a lady called Alice Evans this week, who is an actress. She's married to Ian Griffith, you know who it is. She's been living in Hollywood for a long time, and she said that Weinstein came on to her a few years ago. They were in Cannes, and she said, and I found this honest and interesting, she said there was a moment where she thought, will I? Because if I don't, I'm going to be punished for it. Ugh. Yeah, nice. So, and she didn't. He'd asked her, there was a beach hut, and he asked her to go in the beach hut and do whatever, and he said to her, it'll help your career. And she said, there was a moment I thought, should I? Because if I don't, life is going to be difficult. And she didn't do it. But I actually thought that was the most honest appraisal. And I think a lot of women in Hollywood make that decision.
Yeah, but that doesn't... Sorry, just quickly. Marilyn Monroe, for example.
She said, yes, of course.
We know what she said. She spent a lot of her career on her knees. She is the definition of a powerful actress in the sense that she was the go-to brand in her time. It doesn't matter how successful or visible you are. You are in a power structure that is controlled by a small number of men who we now know...
Get out of it. If you don't want to...
so simplistic.
It's not simplistic.
You're confusing two things, I think. I think, one, you're talking about the contents of television and film over the last decade or so with something that has gone on forever.
Well, I'm not confusing them, I'm deliberately linking them.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think you can necessarily link them. I mean, your argument, Mrs. Whitehouse would have been proud of your argument, you know, when back in the days when Mary Whitehouse...
Every day I get called a prude.
Yeah, Mary, people don't remember Mary Whitehouse.
I remember
her. Where I would agree with you is I think the danger of what's happened in both movies and television is that each year the boundary is pushed a bit more. each year the boundary's pushed a bit more. Then it gets pushed a bit more. And you end up looking at it and saying, hang on, this wouldn't have been acceptable. I mean, I live with a woman who won't watch any of that stuff. So it's never on our screen, because she just, if it's violent, don't want it. And violence, I think, is both towards men and towards women, has become more extreme. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I don't think that has anything to do with...
It's about the normalisation is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I don't think that's necessarily to do with... Because it wasn't there. That sort of violence wasn't there 30 years ago, when it was quite clear that the casting couch was.
This isn't just against women either. Films, by their very nature, are much more violent than they used to be. The violence often includes men. I can't watch the ones where people are getting slaughtered. I can't watch them.
I agree.
But Afua, don't you think the one refreshing thing out of all of this is because so many women are speaking out, particularly with the Me Too campaign, I do think it's going to change. At the end of the day, Hollywood is influenced by money. And I think we're going to see more women not going to see those sorts of films, more female directors coming through. And I do think we're going to see a positive change happening.
I hope so, but one thing...
And more men name and shame.
One thing I've learned from this...
A lot of men who up to now might have thought they could get away with it, now know they're not going to get away with it.
Totally.
So I think it will change.
I like what you're saying, and I hope you're right. But one thing that I've learned from... I didn't know about some of the historic cases where people have spoken out, and I'm like, how come we forgot about that?
Well, Hitchcock,
and then it had to all come out
I don't know how to tell you
again.
this, but the Hitchcock story isn't new. It's been around for a long time.
I never heard that.
When she wouldn't do it with him, her career was over.
And it wasn't just her. There were many women that say that they were mentally abused by him.
How will we know, though, whether the situation has improved? That's the key.
One improvement was the reaction to James Corden's joke, which I'm just going to play you, because that showed that the atmosphere has changed.
Hey, it's so beautiful. Harvey Weinstein has already asked tonight up to his hotel to give him a massage. I don't know whether that groan was that you like that joke or you don't like that joke. If you don't like that joke, you should probably leave now. It has been weird this week, though, hasn't it? Watching Harvey Weinstein in hot water. Ask any of the women who watched him take a bath. It's weird watching Harvey Weinstein in hot water.
You just can't step away from the joke, can you?
That joke, I suspect, in 4 weeks' time would have been OK.
Yes.
The joke in the week he said it was not.
Well, I hope not.
I don't think it would be OK at all. Well, this is what he had to say back. He said, to be clear, sexual assault is no laughing matter. I was not trying to make light of Harvey's inexcusable behaviour, but to shame him, the abuser, not his victims. I'm truly sorry for anyone offended. That was never my intention. Yeah, it's not funny.
Just to come off a little bit, what you're saying, Hollywood stars, and you probably discussed this last week, but they're so keen to lecture us on everything, whether it be Save the Brazilian Rainforest or the rights of American indigenous Indians or whatever, and yet one of the biggest scandals, and clearly people knew there was a whiff, and they just looked the other way because it helped their careers, in part supporting what you're saying with the young women.
And it took them so long to come out and condemn it, too.
I mean, he was incredibly successful.
Yeah, ridiculously
so. He was incredibly successful. Yeah. If you had him on your side, you've got a good chance of getting an Oscar.
But men, too, and I think it's really important what you said. This is not a problem for women. This is a problem for the industry. This is a problem for society. And I don't think the onus should be on actors or actresses who experience this to speak out. And I want to know why men were silent.
Why not? Yes. Why not, Afua?
Because it's wrong.
If it's not going to be the girls...
But why don't they speak out? Yeah. You know, this wouldn't have gone on for as long as it has.
But I'm saying men have an equal obligation to speak out as well. It's not it's not a problem for women to deal with.
That was my topic last week. Like, why have the men been so silent?
I saw.
But Carole, what you have to accept is this is about power. And so... it means that all of us have to change the kind of content we consume.
The minute, and it wasn't the actresses who blew the whistle. It was his brother. But the minute the ball started to roll, he's lost his power, and he would have lost his power 10 years ago if people had come out before and had this kind of avalanche of complaint before.
The point is, it's the individual as opposed to a collective. Yeah. If one person had come out and said this, he'd have denied it and her career's gone. Over. If 20 of them had come out, then you'd have got something. And that's what happened.
I just want to bring it back to my topic, because I know you talked about this last week, but what I want to make this link that you're contesting, which is fair, but I stand by it.
I'm not contesting. I'm saying you haven't got any evidence to demonstrate it.
Well, there are two correlating trends. One is that rape and sexual violence become normalised, and one is that harassment has become routine. And I think
hang on.
that
My argument
not separate
harassment has probably always been routine.
Well, it sounds like it's been getting worse and endemic. If you look at the actresses who've come forward, the scale of it.
I was aware. I never knew. I mean, I've been in those sorts of positions in television. I've never seen harassment, but then I wouldn't, would I? Why would I have seen it or known about it?
Well, when you're working your way up, you might have done. Not as a DG, but when you're working your way up...
Did no one ever come to you and complain?
No one ever tried to harass me. I can tell you.
But any girls ever say...
No, but Greg, as DG, did nobody complain to you?
No.
Really?
You never had to deal with an issue related to that?
Okay.
And that was not a woman.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, Afua, can I say there is evidence, actually, particularly with the rise of internet porn, that has definitely had an impact on sexual assault amongst millennials. So there is evidence that it definitely influences.
Isn't there a difference between sexual assault and inappropriate behaviour?
Yeah, totally.
I think that's the distinction we have to make.
Yeah, but they're all on the same spectrum.
Inappropriate behaviour in the
Carole,
workplace
they are all on the same spectrum.
Some of this Me Too
We start at inappropriate behaviour and end at sexual assault.
But, you know, the inappropriate behaviour has been in every industry, in every area for years. And you know, it's been... I mean, it's in my industry too. And, and I remember times... I remember one particular occasion when I came for an interview in Fleet Street where an editor of a very big newspaper chased me round a table and actually said to me, you know, I can't remember the words he used, but if I did it, I'd get a job. And I remember thinking, you know, never for a second did it occur to me to do it. Not for a second.
Did you report it?
No.
Did you do anything about it?
Because this was 35 years ago. That wasn't the climate. However, what I want to say is I wasn't frightened for a second because men who do that sort of stuff, they don't scare me. I just think they're idiots. And you deal with it accordingly. I remember saying to this guy, are you stupid?
You're more robust than most.
But
it's not... A lot of women have got... You've got to actually confront it.
The more interesting question is why...
Women here, Carole. I think that's really dangerous.
I can understand your position, but why didn't you say anything?
Because I didn't need to. It was dealt with.
Because
I dealt with it with him. I said
you dealt with it with him, but what about the next person?
Are you confident he didn't do it?
The reason I think people didn't, as individuals, didn't take action because they wouldn't be believed.
Precisely.
They would just
and the
deny
impact it would have on their careers. In a way, I think you would have known, Carole, that could create problems for you had you taken it further.
June, a boozy, clumsy pass at a Christmas party. Not something like this, which was but a boozy with someone who... And it all a little bit... Do you shop him?
No, but that's different.
I just want to bring what Jennifer Lawrence has said.
Check if we go out this Christmas.
What Jennifer Lawrence has said is kind of relevant. He's making jokes about it. Jennifer Lawrence said, I let myself be treated a certain way because I felt I had to for my career. I'm still learning that I don't have to smile when a man makes me uncomfortable. What I find interesting about that is she is kind of discussing the spectrum, that actually one end of the spectrum is just someone making you uncomfortable and you just acting like it's fine, and we all do that all the time. I don't know about you, June, but inappropriate behaviour, and you feel that you don't want to make a fuss and you don't want to draw attention.
Be seen as difficult.
The difficult
don't feel like that. I don't understand women who feel like that. Seriously, I don't. And it's not because I'm robust, because I'm not.
It's because about you.
Carole alone, you are robust.
No, but men, you know, I'm talking about, you know, when it happened on a regular basis many years ago. But it wouldn't occur to me not to react. It wouldn't occur to me not to say to them.
But I just think you can't.
This isn't
but
about
that's you as an individual. I don't.
Well, you're asking me for... We're talking about experiences.
OK, panel, it's me next, and I want to set you all a quick question. How much less do you think you earn on average if you're not a white man? I'll tell you in a minute. Brexit is an opportunity. That's something we seem to hear every day. Now, I'm no Brexiteer, but as we leave the EU, we do have the chance to decide what kind of country we want to build. And I believe tackling inequality and embracing diversity should be at the heart of that. The lack of diversity in this country is a major problem. Firstly, it means we are wasting so much talent. Of the 1.4 million people with learning disabilities in this country, only 6% are employed. And only 4% of doctors and 6% of barristers come from working-class backgrounds. It's a terrible waste. But there's also the issue of race. Pay disparity is even worse than you could imagine. New research that I commissioned from the LSE shows that women and men from ethnic minority groups would have incomes totalling an extra £127 billion a year, or £9,300 per person, if their incomes match those of white British men. It's time for the government to act. In the same way we had targets for immigration, let's have them for increasing diversity. And if that means quotas, so be it. We need this more now than ever, because in order for post-Brexit Britain to thrive, we must diversify.
You see, I agree with you on targets and all sorts of things. I don't agree with you on quotas. Okay. I think quotas actually will probably do more damage than good. And of course, at the moment, as you know, they're illegal.
Yes, I know.
I mean, the only areas you can have quotas are in training, where if you can say, well, look, we're short of certain groups in this area, we can discriminate in favour of them in terms of giving them training. Yeah. Other than that, they're illegal. I think, as a society, taking a decision to say we're going to have quotas regardless of talent actually would be quite damaging. Now, I agree with you in the sense that I don't accept there aren't talented people in all areas who could do some of these jobs.
Who are being ignored.
That's why I think targets are a good idea, and I think constantly monitoring the targets is a good idea. I wouldn't go as far as quotas.
OK.
I object to your language, though, Greg. Look, you said quotas regardless of talent. It's kind of this idea that's like a zero-sum game between increasing diversity and merit. And you hear that a lot, that, oh, we should be a meritocracy and, you know, we shouldn't give the less able person the job. And the problem
Can I just add to that? And also, the assumption is that the person from the minority is less able.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's not you. I know, Greg, no one would ever accuse you of that. No one would accuse you of that.
It's not saying they're less able, it's saying, look, if you have targets, you can make the people the management, the people who are working for you, can say, right, go on, why isn't this happening? Let's see, you can do this and do that. The moment you say to quotas, you change the relationship and you say you can only employ black people, or you can only employ a woman, or you can only employ... It's much harder.
I agree.
It's much harder to convince everybody else that it's a good thing to do, whereas targets are a good thing to do.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you that it's much harder, but sometimes the system needs a proper shock. And sometimes we need legislation and we need to act on it instead of just talking about it.
The Equalities Act says no discrimination
not fit
on race,
for purpose,
gender, whatever.
Carole.
You mess with the fundamental principle of that and you cause resentment and eventually racism. And who, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday because I knew what your argument was going to be. Who would want to be that person in the room who was given the job as the quota? Who would want to be that person who got the job because of the colour of their skin? And no, hang on, let me finish. Got the job from the colour of their skin. Even if they're fantastic at what they do, they will never shake that off. And I think there's a certain shame in that for them to be given a job not on merit instead of the colour of their skin. I wouldn't want to be in that
I can actually tell you from first-hand experience what it's like to be that person, because every job I've had, people have assumed I'm there as some kind of positive action.
I don't believe that for a second.
I have been told...
You're a very clever woman.
But people don't look at that. They look at you, they assume you're there through some kind of positive action scheme. How did you get the job? Was it a diversity scheme? And it's the assumption people make, even though it's illegal
to you.
Every single place I have worked, I am not exaggerating, even though it would be illegal to do that, people perceive that if you're there, you somehow got a leg up because you're black.
There's no such thing as positive discrimination. There's only discrimination. And that's not what you're after or about.
No, but what I'm saying is we have to decide the kind of society that we want to create. And sometimes that does take drastic action. So an example would be in America, when they integrated schools, Brown versus the Board of Education, 75% of Americans were against that. The majority of American people thought it was the wrong thing to do. We now know it was the right thing to do. And if you're talking about affirmative action, Hillary Clinton is a beneficiary of affirmative action. You know, she was part of the first wave of women that were allowed into Yale. So what I'm saying is when the system is that unfair, OK, if we're not going to have quotas, then we need to make sure that we have something that we are really serious about, because we've been talking about this stuff for a very long time and nothing's changed.
Well, for a very long time, because possibly one of the most inflammatory remarks goes back to 2001, Greg, when you were Director General of the BBC and you said the organisation was hideously white. What happened as a result of that?
Well, two things happened. One, it was good because the staff knew I was serious about it, which they wouldn't have done otherwise. And secondly, we did put in place a system of targets and in some ways a sort of kangaroo court.
Were you successful?
Yeah,
you put in a kangaroo court?
Well, I called it a kangaroo court, but we put in a court that basically said
all good news then.
Every 6 months you're going to come in here and explain why the racial figures in your department the black and white figures haven't changed.
Did you get a breakthrough?
Yes, we changed.
As you walked, because when I go
did
through,
get a breakthrough.
We did get a change.
Still a long way to go, as we know.
Because we're the industry that loves to lecture people about it, supporting, and that we can look to ourselves in many occasions, can we not?
Completely.
But is it not just about colour? Is it not just about class as well?
Of course,
where people are brought
me,
up their personal circumstances.
Totally, which is why my intro spoke about class and social mobility. For me, diversity is across the board.
You know what you were saying before about how white men... Theresa May's report last week, the racism report, what came out of that? Was
working class
white working class boys were going to 10% less likely to go to university.
I really want to explore this with Greg. So I'm running the news division for you, and I'm in for you, and you say, Nick, come on. And I said, boss, there just aren't any good non-white faces out there.
Come on.
Hold on. We can't find any. I've looked everywhere, and they're not good enough.
You know that's not what happened.
Take me through what happened.
Well, what happened?
Nick, the numbers aren't good enough.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before. I can take you to certain parts of Britain which was clearly large ethnic minorities, groups in that city, and there were nobody working for the BBC.
Okay.
You then say, look, that's got to change.
And Greg, can I add to your point? And I think your point is completely valid. There's a difference between discriminating against somebody who is clearly able and fit for the job to being inclusive and bringing in a whole new talent pool and creating a new pipeline, which is what we need to do. Now, not plugging, but my new book, Diversify, deals with this issue. And some of the research that we conducted for it from the LSE, I'll tell you the income levels. Clearly, even you, Nick, have to say this isn't right.
Well,
so,
rather dark corner.
No, never. You know, there's nothing but love for you, sweetheart. Okay, so average annual income for white men, £35,200.
Yep.
For black African women, £26,000. Carole, you're going to love this. For white women, £24,200. And this is based on a study by the Family Resources Survey.
I'm totally wrong. Just so that, as you know, you rather had me the hospital pass. That cannot be allowed to continue. Absolutely.
So then what do we do about it?
Because first of all, you need to understand why.
Yes.
Because if you don't understand why, you're not going to change it.
Yes, and we do understand.
And if you understand why, then you start saying, OK, are there solutions? Because we know why this is happening.
Totally. And then with these figures, there are multiple reasons.
Which is why stats are only of any use.
When you understand why.
If you understand why and you're prepared to take some policy decisions to change.
So even a sort of example would be even the disparity between black African women and white women on this is purely because actually more black African women work full time. Yeah. So that's why there's that difference in pay.
And another stat that came out this week that I hadn't heard of was that self-employed women in this country earn about 17.5 grand. Self-employed men earn 25.5 grand. Why is that?
Yeah.
OK, look, sorry to interrupt, but it's me next. And yes, Nick, I do have a good idea. It seems the Chancellor of the Exchequer is being squeezed from both ends. On the one hand, Philip Hammond is being pushed to do more for younger people in his upcoming budget. On the other, all the evidence shows that unless, over time, we spend an extra $5 billion a year on social care for the elderly, the system won't cope. This leaves the Chancellor between a rock and a hard place. To do either, he needs more money. But as a Tory, he can't put up taxes. And after 7 years of austerity, there's not that much more public spending to cut. However, there is something a brave Chancellor could do. As taxpayers, we are currently spending £50 billion a year in tax breaks for people who are saving for their pensions. And most of that money is going to the better off. So, Chancellor, why not be bold in the budget and say, from next April, we're going to reduce those tax breaks for those earning more than £45,000 a year. Overnight, you would collect billions more in tax to spend on social care for the elderly and on helping younger people in Britain. What's not to like?
What's not to like, Greg? I think my issue with this, and I've got a lot of sympathy for what you're saying, and it is we do have a problem when it comes to the young. They're really screwed on every level. It's really unfair. But the thing is, they have pensions too. Yeah. And they're also going to be old too at some point. And I worry that kind of portraying this as two completely separate groups, one of whom is kind of creaming the system, the other needs more help, is a bit disingenuous. And actually, today's young people, right, today a 35-year-old now needs £660,000 in their pension to be able to have the same standard of living when they retire as today's pensioners. The average 35-year-old has £14,000 in their pension. So we need to be encouraging young people to invest in their pensions as well. And I know that the tax break on pensions rewards people earning over £45,000, but it also rewards people earning the bracket down. And if you live in London and you're on £40,000 or £45,000, you're not a member of the super rich. So I think there is an issue there. And another thing I just want to raise quickly, 40% of 30 to 40-year-olds do not have any pension savings. No, and which is a big... I'm all in favour of... We need to incentivise people to save for pensions. You do, and those people under 45 will make no difference, who are earning less than 45,000, it'll make no difference to them. They'll still get the tax break. All I'm saying is that disproportionately, this tax break is going to people who earn more than 45,000. And therefore, I've always believed that the rich have got to pay more. But the rich have a cap on how much tax break they can get anyway. So this isn't really helping. This isn't really penalising the rich. The cap is a long way up, but there is. Well, I tell you, it would save you probably 20 billion a year. Or 15, 20 billion, something like that, which would make a lot of difference to social care and make a lot of difference if you wanted to get rid of, say, university fees.
Can I ask a question in terms of individuals? So, what would you reduce it by? What sort of percentage in terms of the break? Personally, I'd just say, look, you get a tax break at 20% right the way through, and that's it. Okay. After that, you don't get a tax break. You still keep getting the 20% tax break. I'd be OK with that.
Don't you think that people should be treated equally within the tax system? Because if you favour one, you alienate another. And I just think, you know, what Hammond's doing this for, I think it's to get votes, you know, and I can't believe he's doing it again. Before the last election, you know, he lost votes and they lost seats because of the attack on the elderly. And let's remember, these people who have got these pensions, they didn't get given them. They've worked really hard all their lives to have these pensions, and they deserve to be able to have the breaks. Because if they're not looked after in their old age, Greg, the state's going to have to do it for them.
It's nothing to do with that, because basically the people who already got pensions, they're fine. It's nothing to do. It's about people paying for pensions. And all I'm saying is we are now, this tax break is going up and up year by year. And actually, it's now, I mean, I think the total tax break is about 40% of what we spend on the National Health Service. It's a lot of money. And therefore, you've got to do something radical. Now, I would continue to give the tax break to younger people at a certain, you know, who are earning a certain amount of money. But all we're saying is when you get to 45, 50, 60, 70,000, you don't need such a big tax break.
Greg. Typically, I don't know about you, but I didn't even start thinking about pensions until I was in my 40s. And I would imagine, I have no data to back this up, but I would imagine most people, 40s and their 50s, by that time, if they're earning that kind of money, they've paid a heck of a lot in tax each year through income tax or corporation tax if they're running their own business, or they buy a car or whatever it might be. They've been paying tax after tax after tax. A little chink to protect them comes along, which, as Carole rightly says, if we don't help them, then they're probably going to rely on the state more, and you want to close it down. I think it's wrong financially, and as for politically, and I know that doesn't... It's not the point. Politically, for the Conservatives, well, you might as well just completely disenfranchise your last voting bloc. So politically it can't work. Fiscally, I think it's unfair.
I only think it would be quite popular, because what it was...
well, not with Tories. What more do I have to say? I said no.
I said I'm in favour.
I know, Nick, as a good Tory, are you still saving for your pension?
Yeah, of course I put money on pensions. It's a fantastic tax efficiency. It's perfectly legal, and it's
great tax efficiency.
But the Exchequer, I mean, the rest of us are now paying 45% of your salary towards your pension scheme.
Right.
We're paying that because you're getting a tax break.
You know, when you put it like that,
tax.
I mean, you know, I hadn't thought about
that. We're giving it, you know, when I was in my 20s, I remember, that was the days, and you remember, the 17% interest on your mortgage payment. Yeah. More than half of my salary went on my... I lived on credit until I was 30. So, you know, young people have just got to kind of work through that. We shouldn't be giving them break... Well, what do you mean, Carole?
I think you are downplaying the scale of the challenge facing young people.
Yeah.
Like, levels of debt among young people are chronic.
So,
they're not going to get pensions, basically.
This government and previous governments have made it difficult for young people. You know, the student loans, the interest on them. There's lots of things they can do for young people. They can take the interest of student loans for a start. They can help people with rental rather than having to buy.
But
because
Carole, you're making my argument. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying you have got to do things, but it's all going to cost money. This government are not going to increase tax. I mean, everybody wants to spend more on everything. I mean, it's what happens in society.
But don't take it off people who've saved.
You're looking... No, I'm not taking off the people who saved. I'm taking off those that are now saving and saying, actually, you get a 20% tax... Look, when we were young, you got a tax break on your mortgage payments. Right?
Yes.
You got a tax break on your mortgage payments. Over time, who took it away? The Conservative government. Rightly. Why should you give tax breaks to people who are paying mortgages but not to people who are tenants? And that gradually went away. The same will happen here. This figure is going up every year quite considerably, and actually it doesn't need to be. So let's take it away from those who don't need it so
I think it's a great idea, and I would happily do it.
I've got a lot of sympathy for it, but I do wonder if it's just a bit of a gimmick as well. You know, this whole new deal for the next generation.
Getting the young.
It's not enough.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's also got to be... Look, if we don't put more money into social care, the system collapses.
Yeah. Interesting now. It's time to crown our straight talker of the week. Leaders of UKIP tend to be quite frank. Nigel Farage certainly doesn't mince his words. And it seems the latest person to try his hand at resurrecting the party isn't scared of answering questions directly either. This is Henry Belton on Sky Sunday with Neil Pallison last weekend.
In an interview with Russia Today, you said that you could strangle a badger with your bare hands. Is that correct?
They gave me a few options as ideas for an initiation ceremony into the leadership of UKIP. And the one that was probably most suitable for me was chasing a badger across Dartmoor, capturing it, and then breaking its neck with one's bare hands.
For backing your own badger hunting skills, you're our straight talker of the week. Nick, have you ever killed a badger with your bare hands?
I don't think I could. No, I've never killed a badger or any other kind of
I think a badger would bite you.
Yes, that's right. I think I might have accidentally run over a fox.
This is funny. We need the animal rights lobby. This is awful.
It's just a bit of biff and bat. Here we go. You're always there, aren't you? Save the badger.
Yeah.
We've run out of time. That's it for today. I promise we'll talk about Brexit again next week.
And badgers.